Narrative video games are fantastic. I love getting deep into a story, unraveling some mystery, or seeing something totally impossible in real life play out in a way that hits me right in the gut. But sometimes stories are intended to be told over several games, and to say the very least, the money men are fickle. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on GameRanks, 10 video game stories that are still incomplete. Starting off with number 10, it's Alan Wake. Like, can you believe it's been more than 12 years since the first Alan Wake came out? The game ended with one of the most infamous cliffhangers of the PS3 Xbox 360 era, almost worth not describing it because it's very confusing and vague, but I will try. The basic plot is Alan Wake is trying to save his wife from this dark presence, a supernatural being that lives in the Cauldron Lake outside of the small town of Bright Falls where Alan Wake is vacationing. As the game goes along, he realizes that all the events of the story were actually written by him, and at the end, enters a quote-unquote dark place and figures out a way to rewrite reality on the fly. The game ends with him diving into the lake, and he writes the words, "It's not a lake, it's an ocean."
It's not a lake. It's an ocean.
Alan, wake up.
His wife emerges, which implies that Wake managed to find a way to her place, and he's been trapped there ever since. Almost nothing in the main plot is resolved other than Alan saving his wife. The darkness is never dealt with, and most of the game's mysteries are just left open. Like, it's partially implied it's all in his head, or maybe that he is the cause of the darkness. There was some DLC that expanded on him being in the dark place, a little standalone game called Alan Wake's American Nightmare that ends with him still trapped, and even when Control came out, there was a DLC that tied the game to Alan Wake, making a shared universe, and there are some pretty interesting things in that DLC, but it didn't progress the plot forward a whole lot. Basically, Alan Wake is still trapped under that lake after all these years. It's been an epic wait, but it does look like things are going to finally continue with Alan Wake 2, which is a real game that looks like it's actually coming out. I, like a lot of other people, really didn't think it would ever happen, but it looks like the sequel is the real deal. And I'm going to say this too, the success of Control is very likely the reason it's happening, because Control takes place in the same universe, and in doing what they're doing, it all expands the narrative for this interconnected, weird thing. It's a video game story that's been incomplete for a very long time, and hopefully we'll get to see Alan Wake finally get out of that lake sometime in the near future, whenever the game does actually come out. At number 9 is Anthem. With the previous point, the game that the story took place in was awesome, and there's, gonna be resolution to the story, possibly. Alan Wake 2 might not actually tie up all the loose ends, we have no idea, but Anthem ain't gonna finish this stuff up. What was meant to be BioWare's big step into the games as a service market, which I don't think anybody really asked for. People were into the idea of the game itself. It was sold to look pretty cool and have some pretty cool mechanics, and then it didn't. So in 2021, they shut down Anthem and returned to greener and financially safer pastures like Mass Effect and Dragon Age. This is a game that was meant to have a very long lifespan, like they wanted it to be the next Destiny, although they would never say the word Destiny. They were even told not to by management. But it's no surprise that most of the mysteries introduced in the story are just going to remain unsolved. If that's all the game did, it probably wouldn't earn a spot on this list, but seriously, I don't care about the fate of Owen or the other guy. There's so many the other guys in that game, like they're all the other guy. It's not an interesting game. After you defeat the generic bad guy and save the day, there's a post-credits scene where some characters show off the corpse of a never-before-seen alien called the Urgoth. Apparently, they're scouting the area, preparation probably for an invasion or something.
This could either be a single scout or the beginning of something much, much bigger.
Corvus is worried that the death of the Monitor, while vital, has left us vulnerable in places we never even considered.
Which is at least kind of intriguing, but it's never going to get followed up on because this game is GONE. They probably would have continued it from that plot tease with an expansion of some kind, but the game's total crash and burn at launch, it's not going to get followed up on. It's another example of games putting cliffhangers into a game when there's no guarantee there's going to be a sequel or any kind of follow-up. Like, they love good sequel teases, especially when it's an unproven property that's possibly going to fail. But, yeah, WoW did it. At number 8 is Darksiders 1. The Darksiders games have been going not exactly strong, but they've been doing well enough to still be around. There's 2 sequels, 1 side game. Maybe they're not the most beloved games out there, but they're pretty good for what they are. Here's the thing. Every game past the first one is a prequel rather than a sequel. The big cliffhanger at the end of the first game, where the main character, War, calls in the other horsemen of the apocalypse and implies there's going to be a big final confrontation, which got everybody who played the game hyped as hell for the sequel, where it wouldn't just have one horseman character, but all 4 of them working together. That was gonna be badass, and we're still waiting for it to happen. Again, standalone games and prequels where you play as different horsemen of the apocalypse on entirely unrelated missions. The lore does tie things together a little, but the games are mostly disconnected outside of the shared setting. The first game ended on a cliffhanger back in 2010, and even though there's multiple games since, we really haven't gotten a resolution to that cliffhanger.
You would wage this war alone?
No. Not alone.
At number 7 is the Mirror's Edge. The first Mirror's Edge game is remembered pretty fondly for the parkour gameplay and still pretty impressive visuals, but not so much the plot. The premise is cool. You're a runner in this near future city delivering contraband packages and messages to people trying to circumvent the surveillance state. Not really a story though. As the game goes on, you uncover a conspiracy against the main character's sister, who's accused of murder, and the secret Project Icarus. If you really want to know what that is, it's just evil runners, but that's about it. At the end of the game, you climb into the bad guy's tower. One of your friends reveals he's actually part of the Project Icarus, so you kick him off a helicopter and escape with your sister. That's the end. You don't actually stop the bad guy's evil plans or anything, and your sister's still wanted for murder, so almost nothing is actually resolved. You did get that guy, and oh, he was a jerk, but that didn't resolve anything. Now you might be saying to yourself, wasn't there another one? Yes, there was, Mirror's Edge Catalyst, but for whatever reason, it was a reboot. I don't really understand why they did that, to be honest. They ignored the ending of the original game and just told a new story, so actually Mirror's Edge remains completely unresolved. Hell, even the reboot actually decided to have its own ending that also left things unfinished, so this is a series with 2 games, 2 completely different stories, 2 incomplete plots, and there's probably not going to be another one because Catalyst really biffed it. At number 6 is Prince of Persia from 2008. The first Prince of Persia trilogy ended on a pretty solid, definitive note. Pretty rare, honestly, as far as video games go nowadays. Might not have been perfect, but could have turned out a lot worse. Like with this reboot, which was simply titled Prince of Persia, big departure to what came before. Somewhat divisive change too. It was not possible to die in the game. The world's non-linear, stories mostly told through conversations with the prince and his companion Elika. And the gameplay is primarily you just going around cleansing control points and collecting orbs. It was an unusual game, especially from Ubisoft. At the end of it, Elika dies, and in a big twist for the game that otherwise had very little story, the prince chose to revive the dark god Ahriman to bring Elika back to life instead of saving the world.
What is one great sadness?
That's how it ends. Like, I would think that would just be a bad ending, if not for some follow-up DLC that was called Epilogue, which continues the story from there. It's just a little bite-sized tease for a potential sequel, though, that just never came. And at this point, it's unlikely that ending is ever going to get a continuation. Probably they'll reboot the entire franchise again, and probably a good idea, because although it was an interesting experiment, that cliffhanger was not necessary.
There. Told you I'd get us out of that.
And number 5 is Mega Man Legends 2, a cliffhanger 20 years in the making. Mega Man Legends 2 came out in the year 2000. The fact that the game even got a sequel was kind of surprising. The Mega Man Legends games are kind of cult favorites, but never sold super great. The first game was nice and cliffhanger free, but for some reason the sequel decides to leave things unresolved in one of the most infamous cliffhangers of all time. All you really need to know is that at the end of the game, Mega Man goes to the moon to confront the bad guy and then runs into a bit of an issue. There's no way back. So the game ends with Mega Man literally stranded on the moon. Post-credits scene shows the other characters trying to build a rocket to get up there and save him, but the one rocket they do fire explodes in air, so that's it. No resolution. There was another Mega Man Legends game after 2 called The Misadventures of Tron Bonne. Yes, that's the actual name. But that was a prequel, so that didn't resolve that. And even though it seemed like fans were finally going to get a resolution when Capcom announced Mega Man Legends in 2010, the abrupt resignation of the kind of leader of the Mega Man series, Kenji Inafune, meant all those projects got canceled, including Mega Man Legends 3. So it's 2023, Mega Man's still on the moon, and he's waiting for somebody to come pick him up. At this point, I wouldn't hold my breath either. Sorry, buddy. You're probably stuck up there for good. And number 4 is Beyond Good and Evil, another entry, another cult favorite game with a story that never got resolved. For such a pretentious name, Beyond Good and Evil is mostly just a fun adventure game about fighting the man with the power of photography. Pretty straightforward until the bizarre ending where, I don't really know what to say about this actually. The basics are that the bad guys, the Alpha Section, have taken your father, Paige, hostage, so you go up to their lunar base to save him. When you get there though, he's dead, and somehow your character, Jade, manages to revive him using some strange power, and then you take on the alien high priest who's secretly controlling the alphas. If that's not weird in your mind, this is where things get weird. Apparently Jade is some kind of like soul container or something, but she beats the boss. A revolution rises up to take out the Alpha Section. It seems like things are good. Then, in a bizarre twist, the last shot of the game is an alien spore growing out of Paige's hand. Pretty dark ending for what is otherwise a fairly lighthearted game. In 2018, Ubisoft showed up a teaser for a sequel, which might just be the game that was resolved that bizarre cliffhanger, but no. It quickly became apparent that that was a teaser for what was a prequel of some kind. In 2020, series creator Michael Ansel departed Ubisoft entirely, and even though Beyond Good and Evil 2 hasn't officially been canceled, it's kinda easy to see the writing on the walls with this one. Like the main guy steering the development hit the road. Probably not going to get finished. Like, I do hope I'm wrong with this one because I would like to see another game in this series, but I don't see it happening. And number 3 is Xenoblade Chronicles X, an oddball spin-off of the popular Xenoblade Chronicles games. Had plenty of shocking twists and reveals, but not many resolutions. Like, for every answer that you got to a question, it raised 5 more questions. The plot of this game makes the story of Lost look straightforward, and it's seriously insane how many shocking reveals they throw at you. Things start off normal enough as far as sci-fi goes. Mankind fleeing from a genocidal alien race crash lands on a mysterious world. Simple enough to grasp, right? But then you find out everybody is actually a robot operated from a central computer core, and then you find out that core's actually been offline this whole time, so how are the robots working? Also, your companion's actually an alien who helped humanity escape Earth, and there's this mysterious hooded figure on the beach. Wonder who that guy is. Seriously, all this stuff gets brought up at the end, but nothing actually gets resolved. It's probably the most incomplete JRPGs ever. I mean, Xenogears was literally unfinished, but still managed to finish the story. This one wouldn't be quite so frustrated if the fact was that the series stopped and there was no way to continue this plot. But these games are still going strong, with the third game continuing the main story introduced in Xenoblade 1 and 2. They could have tied in Xenoblade Chronicles X into the main series continuity if they really wanted to, but at least so far the two series remain separate. So it seems like all that's just going to remain unresolved. Maybe someday Monolith Soft will come back to the black sheep of the Xenoblade series and finally wrap things up. At least they could port this to Switch so a new generation of gamers could just be as confused as all of us from that era are. At number 2 is Shenmue 3. You gotta respect the Shenmue series creator Yu Suzuki for his ambition. If nothing else, back in 1999, the first Shenmue was the most expensive video game ever developed, and while the series has millions of fans, it just wasn't able to make back its ridiculously bloated budget, and the game and sequel were considered commercial failures. The series wasn't meant to end after 2 games. It was intended to run for between 4 and 5, and the pacing of the first 2 games, which can charitably be described as glacial, bears that out. The series has a relatively straightforward plot, basically a revenge story. Ryo's father is killed by a deadly martial artist named Lan Di, and Ryo swears revenge. By the end of the first game, you're boarding a boat to China, and by the end of the second, you see Lan Di in a helicopter, and that's about it. It seemed likely that the story was going to end there, but frankly, after a miraculous Kickstarter campaign, Shenmue 3 came out in 2019, 18 years after the second. This was their chance to finally give the story some kind of resolution, and he fights Lan Di for 2 seconds and then gets BTFO'd. nothing's resolved, nothing new is learned. Basically a rehash of the first game, but in rural China instead of a small urban area of Japan. The whole thing about Shenmue, yeah, I get it. It's more about the journey than the destination. But hey, could resolve the plot here. Really seemed like it was gonna, too, because, like, last boss, Lan Di, oh, guess I have no chance against him, and this is the first game again. Now, Yu Suzuki is saying there's gonna be a Shenmue 4, but hey, it's kind of a miracle there's a Shenmue 3, so I'll believe it when I see it. And finally, at number 1, Half-Life Episode 2. The never-ending wait for Half-Life 3 continues. Every Half-Life game ends on a cliffhanger, and for a while that was fine because the games were, coming out every once in a while. But the ending to Half-Life 2 Episode 2 is pretty infamous for a good reason. It's shocking and heartbreaking at the same time. Everybody loved Eli Vance, who's a great character, and he gets unceremoniously killed at about the last second. It definitely got people excited for Episode 3, which was presumably going to finish the story, and then, hey, it's 2023. Look at that. Wow. So Episode 3 never materialized. Valve continued to make games and rake in money from Steam, but the next Half-Life was MIA. Every few years you hear rumors about a possible Episode 3 leak or a Half-Life 3 announcement, but nothing ever came of it. Everyone basically just assumed Valve gave up on it, but then in 2020, something unbelievable happened. Valve released a game called Half-Life Alyx. Nobody expected it to actually address the ending because it was a prequel, but then people got to the end of that game and somehow found a way to make the wait for the next Half-Life game even worse. So, things go off the deep end in this game. Alex meets the G-Man, and he reverses Eli's death. Half-Life Alyx's story ends once again in the hangar, but instead of Eli being dead, he's alive and Alex is gone. So after all that time, the story is still incomplete, but in a different way. Maybe the story will continue if they make a new game, or maybe they'll just retcon something else that's already happened. I don't know. I don't even try to figure it out. Half-Life is crazy. Quick bonus for you too, Dead Space 3, just putting it in the bonus section because it's kind of up for debate whether it's a cliffhanger or just a really dark ending. At the end of Dead Space 3's DLC Awaken, Isaac manages to fly a spaceship back to Earth to try to warn them about the incoming Necromorph threat. Now this is a horror story, so things don't go exactly as planned. As it turns out, the Necromorphs are already on Earth. 2 of these ridiculous brother moons are hovering over the planet, and you hear screaming over all the comms. If you want to read it as an ending, then that works, but from what we know, it's unlikely that the series was meant to end there. Apparently, the idea for Dead Space 4 was that Earth had fallen, and you travel around between the surviving colonies and try to save the remaining human race. That isn't a bad idea for a sequel, but with Dead Space 3 not selling enough for EA, that pretty much meant the end for the franchise. So maybe the remake, being like universally lauded as a huge success, maybe it's going to give them a chance to revisit the idea, hopefully after completely changing what Dead Space 3 is. Like, I don't care so much about the story being changed for it. Like, the story's fine. Make the game work and be good. Like, if they can make Dead Space 3 like 1 and 2, you can go through the exact same story. I'm not going to be upset at that at all, especially if that means that the story is going to continue from there. That's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications too. As always, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon Hero, and we'll see you next time right here on GameRanks.